Every MLB season, there are always a few players who experience a big drop in performance from the season before. Whether it's injuries or old age that slow a player down, we've been seeing these unfortunate declines more commonly over the past 10 to 15 years. Sometimes, these types of seasons are predictable. Think Felix Hernandez from this past year. However, there is one huge drop-off in production that nobody could have seen coming. A type of season that even the most pessimistic of Mets fans couldn't have predicted. Today, we'll be taking a deeper look into Edwin Diaz and why he went from saving 57 games and being the most dominant closer in baseball to setting an MLB record for most ninth-inning home runs surrendered in a season and being demoted from the closer spot altogether. Before we talk about his decline, let's look at how he got to this point. Edwin was born in Naguabo, Puerto Rico, a small town that's produced players like journeyman catcher Martin Maldonado and Jose Melendez, a solid reliever for a few seasons with the Padres in the 80s. Diaz went to Caguas Military Academy where he formed an unhittable pitching tandem with current Royals pitcher Jorge Lopez. He was drafted in the third round of the 2012 draft by the Mariners and spent 4 full seasons in the minors, cementing his status as a top prospect in the organization. In 2016, he was called up to the big leagues and made his debut on June 6th at home against the Indians, where he didn't take much time to show the fans that he belonged.
He is bringing some serious gas here tonight at Safeco. Swing and a miss, struck him at his first big league strikeout. Edwin Diaz, 2 down here in the 7th.
Diaz pitched well enough as a rookie to spend the entire rest of the season in the big leagues, also spending some time as the Mariners' closer along the way. In 2016, he threw 51.2 innings, had a really solid season, and earned himself a permanent roster spot. Diaz came into 2017 with high expectations from Mariners fans, and he didn't disappoint. 2017 was his first full season on the bigs, and he again pitched very well in an expanded role, firmly taking the closer job as his own and piling up 34 saves this time around. Taking a look at his numbers, he was technically worse than the season before, but he still pitched extremely well enough that he was named the number 4 reliever in baseball by MLB Network's crew. Then came 2018. In short, Diaz was nasty. I mean, just look at the numbers. That microscopic FIP is actually one of the lowest in the decade in a full season. Diaz racked up 57 saves, shattering Fernando Rodney's team record of 49. His campaign was enough to net him the Mariano Rivera Award, given to the best reliever in the American League, beating out guys like A's sinkerballer Blake Trinan and Yankees flamethrower Aroldis Chapman. Even though the Mariners collapsed at the end of the season and missed the playoffs, fans still had hope that their current core might be good enough to get them to a wildcard spot, or at least in contention for one. But then, the great Jerry DiPoto decided that it was rebuild time in Seattle and traded Diaz along with all-star second baseman Robinson Cano to the Mets for a package including lefty slugger Jay Bruce, veteran reliever Anthony Swarzak, and top prospect Jared Kelenic, among others. After adding Diaz and Cano, hopes were high in Queens, even with the Braves, Phillies, and eventual World Series champion Nationals having lots of talent as well. Diaz was the obvious pick to be the closer in New York, seemingly solidifying a bullpen that also had guys like Seth Lugo, Justin Wilson, and Yuri's Familia to go in the later innings as well. For the first time in a while, Mets faithful had something to look forward to. Diaz actually started 2019 off really strong, and through the end of May, the bullpen was rolling with Diaz at the helm. However, things took an unbelievably sharp turn on a cool May night in Los Angeles. You all know the one, when our man of the hour entered the bottom of the 9th with a comfortable 3-run lead. Well, it probably would have been comfortable if he wasn't facing the heart of the hottest lineup in baseball. Righty killer Jock Peterson was due up to start the inning, and he crushed a terrible slider for a homer, cutting the lead to 2. But hey, that's just 1 run. He'll get the next guy, right? He's Edwin frickin' Diaz. Enter Max Muncy to crank a fastball right in his wheelhouse over the short fence in right field. That 3-run lead from earlier? Yeah, now it's just 1. Diaz goes on to give up back-to-back doubles to Justin Turner and MVP Cody Bellinger, which tied the game at 8. The Dodgers loaded the bases without ever recording an out, and rookie outfielder Alex Verdugo walked it off with a deep enough fly ball to bring Cody Bellinger to the plate. Getting shelled by the Dodgers was what effectively broke Diaz. After that outing, he would blow 5 more saves and give up 12 more ninth-inning homers on his way to an MLB record. He ended his season with some atrocious numbers, and was bad enough to lose his closer job to Seth Lugo and get booed off the field by his own fans. When people try to figure out what went wrong with Diaz, they always go back to the game against the Dodgers, saying that getting rocked that hard, not getting it out, broke his confidence. This is probably true, but I want to take a look at some stats that not enough people have seen. First, he had an 8.7 walk rate, which is nothing short of awful. We've always known Diaz has been able to get by on having swing and miss stuff, even if he misses his spots, but this year he just wasn't as effective at getting weak contact and whiffs like he used to. Actually, he was giving up mortar shots at a historic pace with a, get ready, 48.8% hard contact rate. The next closest guy was Madison Bumgarner at 43.8. So this year Diaz was basically serving up barrels to hitters. Of course, all that hard contact leads to a pitcher's worst nightmare: homers. And our buddy Diaz gave up lots and lots of those. In order to explain how good Diaz was at giving up homers this year, I'm going to give you all a personal anecdote. I've been a Dodgers fan for my whole life. I was born in 2004, so I've had the pleasure of watching two lights-out closers night in and night out: Eric Gagne and Kenley Jansen. I don't remember much of Gagne, but Kenley's been a huge part of my life so far. He's been the reason for some of the biggest Dodger wins and losses over the last 10 years, and he's been an anchor for a usually shaky bullpen. But much to my dismay, Kenley's declined over the last 2 seasons, losing a ton of velocity and movement on his famous cutter. Sure, he's still pretty solid, but he's giving up more homers than I'm accustomed to seeing. His home run to fly ball ratio this past season was an abysmal 13.2%, and I thought about how the days of Kenley Jansen dominating the 9th inning were over. With that in mind, I can't even imagine how Mets fans felt this year, considering Diaz had a home run to fly ball ratio of, get ready again, 26.8%. 26.8! That's 2 times what FanGraphs affectionately considers to be awful. No wonder he broke that 9th inning homer record. Okay, we've looked at Diaz's measurables as to why he did so badly this year. But those percentages and ratios don't explain one thing. Why? What was different about this year that made him so bad? Well, I have a theory. I can't definitively prove it, but it would make total sense as to what's going wrong. In my opinion, it's all in his slider. This past year, Diaz threw 363 sliders and averaged 1 inch a break away from right-handed hitters and 29 inches a drop. The league average on sliders? 6 inches of horizontal break and 37 inches of drop. Based on the averages, Diaz's slider moved more like a cutter than it did a traditional slider, and its high velocity doesn't exactly help either. The small movement plane on the pitch restricts Diaz to only having one effective spot, down and away from righties. Diaz only having one truly effective spot for his slider created a 71% reliance on his fastball, which is way above average, don't get me wrong, but big league hitters are really good, and when they see a pitch 70% of the time they face a guy, they get used to it. So there's the framework of my theory, but there's one interesting possibility regarding Diaz's slider this year that nobody's brought up, something that could prove what I'm saying. The Mets pitching staff is known for one specific pitch, the Dan Warthen slider. Developed by Mets pitching coach Dan Warthen, the appropriately named Warthen slider is designed as a slugger, or a mix between a slider and a cutter. The Mets love to have their flamethrowers use the Warthen slider as opposed to the one they were using previously, and it's worked pretty well for a lot of guys. A few Mets pitchers who are known to throw it are Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, now Philly pitcher Zach Wheeler, and Steven Matz, among others. While it works for those guys, what do they all have in common? All these guys are more over the top than Diaz. On average, those 4 guys throw their Warthen sliders at 5 feet 11 inches above the ground. Whereas Diaz? Well, he's at 5 feet 3 inches. My hypothesis is that when Diaz got to New York, Warthen and the Mets had him scrap his old standard slider, taught to him by Joaquin Benoit, in favor of the Warthen slider, and he couldn't figure it out because his arm slot was too low. This led to a reliance on the fastball, and had a subpar slider which, without any other off-speed CUs, made it easy for hitters to figure him out. And there you have it. That's my theory as to why Edwin Diaz was so bad this past season. Comment what you think went wrong, and if you liked what you saw in this video, please consider subscribing, because I have a few more video ideas that will be similar to this one. That's all for today, baseball fans. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.